So thank you, Merida. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Linda Cruse, for joining us from the hospital where your 93-year-old mom has an issue with her leg, and it's a difficult time. So I know this is a poignant moment, and I just want to honor that you always show up. You show up when it's cold, when it's hot, when it's sunny, when it's tsunami, and I really bow to your compassion. And maybe for the benefit of those who are with us and those who will be listening and watching the recording, you could just start us off with the way that you came to be a humanitarian, that moment, perhaps that key moment when you knew something had to change, and then everything else followed.
No, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Yeah, I mean, my first career, I was a nurse, and I absolutely loved it. At 18, I started to become a state registered nurse, and it was a real vocation and calling for me. I got married when I was very young and had 2 children by the age of 26. And my marriage failed soon after that. So by the age of 28, I was a single mom with 2 lovely children, Gail and Graham. But my nursing would no longer actually pay for me to take care of my children as I wished to. And so I knew that I had to take a job, and that job was for money to be able to take care of my children. And at the time, the pharmaceutical companies were really wanting medical sales reps, and all I could see was company car and subsidized mortgage and good salary and good holidays. And I thought, I can do this. And I was good at it, but actually I hated every moment of the job. Of course, I'd come back and I'd see my 2 lovely children and I would say, it's okay, you can do it. But actually, of course, each day the stress was getting more and more. It just was elevating to a level where I was just completely miserable. And there was one time that I was driving from the north of England to the south after a sales conference. I had the most incredible stabbing pains behind my eyes, and the curtains came down and I went blind while I was driving. And I have no idea how I didn't kill myself or how I survived, actually. But that was the absolute turning point in my whole life, because as I sat there thinking, first of all, my life is over, why me, what have I done wrong? I then really started to say the prayer, and the prayer was, if my sight comes back, I promise I will find what I was born to do. And it was one of those absolute cry of the soul where I didn't know what else to do. I just had to surrender everything. And I was very lucky, of course. It was temporary blindness. My sight came back, but I'd made a prayer and a call of the soul, and my prayer was, if my sight comes back, I will find what I was born to do. And so I kept that promise, and I started to work on myself because I was such a miserable, unhappy person. But more than that, I realized that what I was doing with my life was not what I was born to do, and I must actually then dig deep to find out what that was. And the process very, very much revealed that I needed to go back into the caring, compassionate, humanitarian world. But I felt there were loads of people that could be a nurse in safe, sanitized England. And I felt I had the courage and the capacity and the strength to help people. And my pledge was to help people at the worst time of their lives and the worst places on the planet. And this was my absolute commitment after my sight coming back. And my children were about 2 years away from them living their own dream. My daughter going to university and my son to the army. So I waited until they were living their dream. And then I sold everything I own and I started my life as a humanitarian. And I've been a frontline humanitarian now for over 2 decades. We're 23, so 23 years, 24 years. And I still only own the contents of one suitcase. I don't own anything. And I know when anyone ever says to me, you should now settle down, and I'm like, nope, my job is to be the person on the front line who is there to really help rebuild lives when it's the most catastrophic time in the poorest countries that have no government to support and no social services, or if it's after a war like Afghanistan or Pakistan. And I will go and help to rebuild economically the situation for the people. I call it a hand up, not a handout. And so that they can then actually return to living a life that they want to have, whether that's in the Amazon, the Sahara Desert, you know, in the Philippines and India, wherever in the world, that they then have a self-sufficient life. So that's how I started. And I know I will never stop when people say, will you ever retire? And it's never. I mean, I will keep doing this until I take my last breath. And I'm always looking for people to push me around in a wheelchair because I'll probably need it at some point. But you know, it's absolutely what I was born to do, and I love it so much. And now I inspire students all around the world to be the change they want to see in the world, and business leaders. I've worked on every continent. I've worked with every religion, with Hindus, Buddhists, communists, Christians, you name it, Muslims, and it's just lovely to be able to be the absolute heart, soul, hand up for people at the very, very worst time in their lives. Yeah, that's what I do. So what would you like to know now? I'm sorry, I'm not really completely in tune with what I'm meant to be doing, because one half of my heart is with my mum and dad back in the hospital room. So if you'd like to ask me a question, I would love to share anything. Yeah.
I think, Linda, we've spent time talking about Race for Good, and I think it would be wonderful if you could share with us how people can get involved with Race for Good, individuals or schools.
Yeah, but I mean, Race for Good is a program I've developed, which is through my very deep experience working on the front line with the biggest problems that we've got. And I realized that, you know, it really is time to take the best and brightest brains to help solve the world's most critical social and environmental problems. Governments and charities have a good old stab at it, but they're also incredibly busy. And it's up to I believe, every person on the planet to step up, to actually take responsibility for being part of the solution, and not just complain or moan at governments and charities they're not doing a good job. You know, just take the whole thing of climate change. It's up to all of us to do something for it ever to have any effect. So what I did was started the Race for Good, and it's my target audience absolutely are young people. I call them the future leaders, anyone from age 10 upwards, and literally, you know, because I work in universities as well, and then adults, mostly from the private sector, from industry. Why have I chosen this part of society? Because we desperately need innovation. You know, we have so many of the problems that have reincurred over the last sort of 20, 30, 50 years, because I believe the greatest innovators are coming out of schools with their brilliant, unprogrammed, fresh brains. And equally, you know, think of people who are creating the Teslas and the greatest innovations, they are in industry. So they are my target audience. Now, when I took this target audience, I also know they're very busy people. So I designed something that is fast, fun, high impact. They only take part in the Race for Good for a very short time. To make it fun, I put it in as a competition. So people literally are given a critical issue, and in their teams, they have students and business leaders in each team, and they compete against each other with the vulnerable community as the judges. And whoever actually wins the solution, as judged by the vulnerable community, it gets implemented immediately. So young people, as well as business leaders, love to know that they are not wasting their time. Never hypothetical. I don't believe in it at all. There's too many critical issues in the world for us to do anything that's hypothetical. And so this is always the solution. The problems they're given are real life solutions, whether it is climate change, where I'm working at the moment in the Arctic, or whether it's, you know, a community damaged after an earthquake, tsunami, or war. These are real people, real problems, real impact, and it's immediate. How can you get involved? I mean, I have a website, which is lindacruse.com or the race4good.com, and people can sign up as individuals, equally as company groups or as school groups. And literally I work with people anywhere on the planet. You don't have to be in the US or Europe. You could be anywhere in the world. In fact, the more diverse, the better. And it's very easy, and the race lasts between 3, 5, 10 weeks. So you can do a very short race or a longer race. But it's fun, it's fast, it's high impact, and you really use what I would say are your most precious things, which is your time, your talent, your innovation, your compassion, your heart, your soul, to actually give a sustainable hand up to people who need it more than you can possibly imagine. And you are leaving your own legacy, and you can be as young as age 10. I've just come back from the Arctic, where I actually took students with me onto the front line to do exactly that. And I had a 12-year-old from Tokyo with me teaching hydroponics on the front line at minus 40 degrees centigrade, as close to the North Pole in Greenland as you can possibly get. And he was a superstar. So never say I'm too young, or I'm, you know, anyone can do it. And this is how I believe each of us can really feel and know that we have the power, and I call it the power of one, to make a sustainable difference in the world. Yeah.
So can you give us an example of a project from start to finish?
Yes, absolutely. Let's take a project where it was a situation of poverty after an earthquake. Let's take a situation in Nepal where the government are not able to really take care of their people as much as they'd like to. It's not a wealthy government, and they don't have very good healthcare service. The people are one of the poorest in Asia. And if they have, like, for example, right now, because of climate change, they're having the most awful flooding, right? Flooding, landslides, because the flooding is so bad that is creating terrible landslides, which is creating a lot of death, not just to people, and dwellings coming down, but their animals are dying, so they're having to relocate where they're actually living. And so my team in Nepal at the moment are going to these villages, helping them to relocate, but also helping them to restart their lives through the Race for Good. So we will say to the student teams, right, you have a community where there's, let's take 10 households who are the most vulnerable, tend to be single women with children, and they have no financial assistance coming from anywhere, so they have to earn money right now. And that's the problem. And the students are given literally the names, the ages, the location of where the community is, how close they are to market. And they have to come up with a new business idea of how these people can earn money now. I mean, because it's now that they're suffering, they just can't eat, they can't get any food because they have no money. And so this is the challenge that the students are set. And this type of thing will be over maybe a week maximum, because it's an emergency. It wouldn't even be over 3 weeks. And this happened literally 10 days ago for a community up in the high Himalayas. And the students very carefully thought about what they could do. And they believed in this situation, the most easy thing that would support the people was for them to have goats, because goats are in the Hindu religion, goats are a sacred animal, and so they're very high value meat. Goats are, you don't need any care for feeding, they'll forage anything. They don't need vet bills, and they can just graze and breed. And so that was one of the winning solutions that the students came up with, and my team have already implemented it. And they take emergency food that will last them for a month, and then the families are on their own regarding creating a cooperative, actually, because all 10 families will have goats, because that's the cooperative that was the winning idea. And it's the most incredible impact. And it's not just economic uplift, which of course is obvious. I've just shared what happens, but it's companionship. It is knowing that they've got hope, and that this is going to give them complete independence, self-esteem, and dignity back. Yeah. And it's about, the budget is so tiny. I mean, goats are about $50 each. So you can imagine the budget that's required is so low to start a whole cooperative going. Yeah.
Great. How many schools have you been working with over the time that?
Oh, golly gosh. Hundreds.
So if a school,
Hundreds of schools. Yeah.
If a school was interested in getting involved with Race for Good, how do they go about it?
Yes, just go onto the website, and there's a great way that, I mean, the students, because of safeguarding, students cannot sign up as individuals to take part unless they're over 18. But a teacher, of course, can sign up for the school on behalf of the students, and it's very easy to do on the website. And yeah, and I've got loads of races running all the time, actually. But at the moment, we're very much focusing on the Arctic, and helping people who are really suffering there. Although, of course, climate change is affecting everyone. As I said, even in the Himalayas, they're now having terrible flooding because of the problem of climate change. But yeah, the teachers have to sign up. Students, unless they're over 18, the teacher has to do it. Yeah.
And so when, let's say that you have a group of 20 students, 15, is there a kind of minimum, maximum that you might take to an area?
I mean, if they want to physically come on the front line with me, then that would be, I suppose minimum would be 10 students coming with me. But we do a lot online, because many students either can't afford it, or because of COVID, people are reluctant to actually travel. And so I mean, the last race that we ran, we had about 3,000 students around the world taking place at the same time. And it was online from every continent simultaneously. Yeah.
Wow. Can you brainstorm with us for a moment? The charter has a number of compassionate schools. I'm wondering how we can get the word out in the best way. I know you have this marvelous, beautiful website. But as you know, right now, everyone, as we're trying with so much in the way of Zoom and social media, what might be the best way for us to really get a race going, a charter race?
Well, I would actually, I mean, my idea would be put a flyer together, because I work with school networks, which is the same as you, right? So Forbisia, the Forbisia School Network, which is the Federation of British International Schools in Asia, John Gwynne Jones has 180 schools in his remit, and he sends a flyer out to the 180 schools and says, the race is starting on this date. This is what it is. This is the subject. It's going to be in the Arctic. You're going to be meeting hunters and Inuits and learning about the Arctic and climate change and the lives of polar bears and what have you. And if you want to join, this is how you do it. And this is the sign up date. This is the way you sign up. And he just literally sends out a flyer. And you don't give people a long lead time. Of course, it's the school holidays have just started now, so no one's going to be doing anything for a while, but it's very easy. And I would say within 2 weeks, you must have at least 50 schools signed up. I mean, it's very easy. Yeah.
And so are you the primary person, along with what sounds like your team, that would lead the race?
Yes, yeah, yeah, definitely.
Wow.
It's my baby.
Can you talk
Yes.
about a couple upcoming races that you see?
Yeah, I mean, we have literally two, I mean, because in India and Nepal, the flooding, because, you know, you're talking countries that are incredibly poor, especially Nepal, that there will be some races that focus on the Himalayas with the climate change effects there. But equally, what I'm finding that the students are loving probably more than anything is really understanding what's happening in the Arctic. And I'll also be working with a school in Antarctica. There's one school in Antarctica, which was only one school, right? Because it's because of the landmass. But I do feel that young people are tired of us adults saying we're doing things about climate change and nothing happening. So I feel that students really want to meet families. I'm all into human connection. I'm not into the science. The scientific facts are all there, but still nothing is happening until we are inspired as humans to take action. No one will do anything. So scientific facts do not inspire us to do anything. So I would suggest, and I've got a couple of races coming up in the autumn, global races on the Arctic. And I would suggest with your charter schools that a flyer regarding the Arctic races would be superb, because the fascination by the students to really understand what's going on. And also I do live calls with students living in the Arctic, with hunters, so that they are fascinated by the Inuit indigenous wisdom and their life and how they survive when there's no vegetables, there's no fruit, there's no salad, there's minus 40 degrees centigrade, it's a desert, you can't grow anything, and yet they're healthy. So unbelievable people, the most resilient people on the planet. No flush toilets, no mod cons at all, and yet they're happy, thriving people whose lives are being completely destroyed through climate change. So it's up to all of us to make the small difference that we can, each of us, in our day-to-day lives, and help these people to stay where they are living in the Arctic, because they don't want to relocate. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I feel it's funny because I was working with a company and doing like a live situation with them for them to start to understand about climate change. And these very stuffed suit businessmen were like, I'm going to do something, because I never realized, and I've never spoken to anyone who's suffering like that. And actually, ultimately, our world will disappear unless we do something. But until they speak to people whose world is melting 4 times faster than anywhere else on the planet. And literally, you know, I think this is human. Emotion drives outcome, right? And if you're not emotionally connected, you can forget it. You can go to the pub, you can have your evening meal, you can go watch a movie. But if you're emotionally connected to someone who is really suffering because of climate change, you are driven to action. Yeah. So that's my pledge and my mission. And I've been invited to speak at COP28 in Dubai. And I will be giving a voice and a platform to the Inuit people living in the Arctic. And you know, we need to be emotionally driven now to make change. And I will make it happen. Yeah.
How did you meet Jeff? And for people who are listening to this recording, Jeff has been a part of the Charter for Compassion from the very beginning, and is part of our Global Compassion Council. And he always brings us wonderful ideas and people like you, Linda. So I'm just wondering how that connection was made.
I think Jeff and I have known each other for many lifetimes, actually. I don't think you can even talk about this one. Can you, Jeff? I don't think we can even start here. I honestly, do you know, Jeff probably remembers. I think I've always known Jeff, so I couldn't tell you.
Well, at least in this lifetime, we met at the beginning of the pandemic through a mutual contact and friend. I was in India offering a workshop and met a woman who was an executive in the pharmaceutical industry and committed to operating with compassionate, conscious principles in that industry. And I don't know when, Linda, you met her, but she had the idea that it would be good for us to connect. And you followed through. We had a great conversation. And at that time, as I recall, because of the pandemic, you needed to shift gears. You needed to shift online. Yeah. And so I witnessed you pivot very successfully from frontline experiences and actually going places in the aftermath of traumatic events, earthquakes, tsunamis, as you said. And you found a way to help people to engage across the continents, across every kind of divide, virtually using Zoom. And I believe the Race for Good format existed before, but you hadn't really taken it to the whole world the way that you have in just the last few years. And I've witnessed you bring young Muslims together with young Hindus living in the Himalayas, the Muslims in a wealthy nation in the Middle East, and seemingly with nothing in common. And yet very quickly, they forged deep bonds of friendship and trust. Radical empathy is something that you emphasize over and over again, so that when we have the heart connection and we know what it's like to live the life of another person, particularly in a vulnerable community, then action happens. And the genius of the younger generation is accessed, the unconditioned minds for whom anything is possible. If they can dream it, they can do it. We so need that. And the Race for Good is a format that unlocks this potential. And of course, the value of bringing in the mentors from the corporate world, the private sector, and the alchemy somehow of people who have a lot of experience and technical know-how, who know how the systems work, who know how to build businesses that can scale, and then the fresh ideas of the younger folks is proven to be very effective. You've had people in the Race for Good who were on Shark Tank, the youth edition, and you have some of the world's leading schools. You already mentioned the Phobisia network. There are many other networks I know that you work with. So if you were to add up all the schools and all the networks that Linda is connected with, it's thousands. And if we think about the potential for the Charter and Race for Good, I don't know what the school count is now within the Charter network, but it's large. And it seems to me a very ripe opportunity to circulate a flyer, a call to participate, and see what kind of interest there is. I know it could happen very quickly. And Linda, you didn't speak about the Arctic Race for Good per se, but that, as I recall, is the global race that's
correct.
Fall.
Yeah, correct. And that's the one for the fall. Thanks, Jeff. That was a very great reminder of the beauty of how we met, because I must admit, I feel that it's just been so long that I can remember the point. But yeah, the Arctic Race for Good is the one that will happen in the autumn. And it is so compelling for young people. It's unbelievable. I've never seen such a pull for, and such an incredible lack of knowledge, both for teachers and students and parents. I mean, when I ran at the last one, a lot of these very bright kids did all the research did surveys on what knowledge people had about climate change in the very North Pole. And it was like only 7% of the people interviewed had any idea what was going on. I mean, that's horrific, because this is where, the most critical things are happening, and where, our worlds will go underwater if we don't start to do things, because the melting is so fast. And so I feel that if we can emotionally engage young people, it's the young people that will nag the parents, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles to take action. It's always the children that really push change. It's, because that's their role, and it is their world and their future. And it's also incredibly interesting, for everyone. And I see the kids literally mesmerized when they start to learn about icebergs and narwhals and how you survive in conditions like that. You know, it's very emotionally compelling, and absolutely the radical empathy. They do take action. Yeah. And just for a bit of fun, when I did the last school in Japan, they even turned off their heated toilet seat, which for a Japanese person is a very big deal. So they turned off their heated toilet seat for climate change. So there you go. If every Japanese person does that, it makes a big difference. Yeah, I mean, it is very exciting. It's very easy. And I'd be delighted to do it with the charter schools, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was thinking, you know, we're in 12 sectors, and one of our sectors, the environment sector, education, social justice sector, coming together and really promoting this. But I was also thinking, Linda, of like one of the things with our environment sector is that they're working with a village right now in Uganda that's having terrible problems with pollution in their water, with people getting incredibly ill. And as you mentioned, with the situation in the Arctic region, that healthcare is almost non-existent, and people are really suffering from
Yeah.
illness because of water contamination. And so I wonder if people come to you with these kinds of massive problems and say, can you put this on your roster? Or, you know, can you help get lots of people, students involved in schools in helping with this situation?
I mean, it's no doubt that it happens occasionally. I mean, I was called to work in Vail, Colorado, because they have a very critical issue. What do you think it is? What do you think the critical issue is in Vail, Colorado? And it's really critical. For me, it was a glitzy ski resort in the US, but it's not. It's something else.
Huh. I know this is a quiz, I'm guessing.
It is a quiz. And I was horrified because I went there to do a TED talk, and then they said, we have a very critical issue here. And they said, it is hunger.
Mm.
And I said, why is that? And they said, well, everyone that works here are very poor Latinos. They can't afford to live in a home. They all live in these sort of caravans, these mobile homes, and they can't afford to eat because it's too expensive. And so 70% of the children who go to school in Vail, Colorado have to be fed by the Salvation Army.
Mm.
So I do get asked to do the most bizarre things like that in a first world country. And it was very shocking. And it was very simple, though, because I think there's always such a lack of awareness or people taking responsibility. And we just brought all the stakeholders together, you know, the resort owners, and really brought the awareness of what was going on. And it wasn't long before we solved that one. And it's, I hope, still continuing. But yeah, I mean, we get all sorts of issues brought to us. But yeah, why not? I mean, it doesn't matter where it is. Of course, somewhere like the US, of course, you've got an incredible government and you've got social structure. So I don't tend to work in first world countries at all. No, I don't, because they shouldn't need the sort of help that I give. But if I'm asked to, like in Vail, then yeah, I did go. Yeah.
Right. Well, I know, Linda, that you're in a crisis situation, and
Yeah.
and I think
So I have a question, because I just noticed
Okay.
on the website that you also have a 6-week challenge. Does
Oh.
that happen every year as well?
I really customize it. If I feel, sometimes I do 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, longer.
Okay.
So that people, it's very open to what students, groups wish to do. So I customize it. I probably put 6 weeks up because that's average, the length people like to do. But
Okay.
it's very much customized to whatever the group and people feel is appropriate for their school term and for that network. So everything is personalized, really. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Linda, for sharing. And one thing we promise at our end is that we'll get information out, not to the masses, but to people who really are interested
Thank you.
and able
Yeah.
to get involved.
Well, I do appreciate it, and thank you. I mean, my energy is, as if anyone knows me, as Jeff does, is not as it should be. I feel very, my dad has been crying mostly like all the time. And so like our house is full of, it's sad at the moment. It's a very critical time. So, but as Jeff knows, if I say I'll do it, I will do it. And I thought my sister would be here to take care of mum and dad, but she wasn't able to due to her health problems. So it is how it is. But as my dad always says, the show must go on. So he said, go out and do it. And here I am. So
And you made it happen. So thank you. So kind of you
my pleasure.
to do it.
Thank you.
Jeff,
Yes,
you were
please,
going
Jeff.
to say something.
Yes, I would just like to mention that Linda's team created a presentation, which is very good. It embeds several videos, which will give a lot more information about the race and in particular about the recent experience with Kanak in Greenland, where there was a race and students from Japan came and implemented the winning solutions. And it's a beautiful illustration of the power of this work. So with your permission, Linda, perhaps we could send the presentation to Marilyn and Merida, and then the charter could share it with those who registered.
Delighted. And I mean, it does give people a very heartfelt, emotional connection to, you know, that on that video, Jeff, there is a 12-year-old teaching hydroponics, right? So it just shows it doesn't matter how young you are, you have the courage and capacity and the ability to change the world. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for your part in changing the world and for
so
giving
much.
us this
Thank you.
time today.
Oh, very, very, very. I do apologize that I'm not quite myself, but I was here. That's the main thing. And thank you, Jeff, so much
Blessings.
for being there. Thank you, thank you, thank you,
No,
Jeff.
you're so welcome.
Thank you, Merida. Thank you so much, Marilyn. And yes, sending love to you all, and whatever I can do from my side, I'm here to support you. And thank you very, very, very much. Yeah.
Goodbye.
Okay.
Thank you,
Bye-bye for
Linda.
now.
Take care.
Blessings to
so
you and the
much.
family.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow.
Thank you both.
Thank
Okay.
you.